In fact, Edward wrote a book back in 1945 about his knowledge of the blueprints of all creation. On the cover of Leedskalnin's book is the clue to the blueprint of nature's two magnetic currents that are the basis of all structures and creation in our universe. Edward claimed to know the ancient science of sacred geometry, which represents the knowledge of two magnetic currents, and the neutral particles of matter that orbit as a common core. Now, this code clue has been left behind by many ancient cultures, such as the golden section, the golden ration, phi, flower of life, time measurements, etc. Now, maybe he did and maybe he didn't. But the whole theory to me seems so odd that I wouldn't even know how to argue against it. In fact, I've never heard of the ancient cultures called the golden section or the golden ration or phi or the flowers of life or time measurement. Never heard of them. I'm not saying he made them up, but I've never heard of them. So if you make claims that are so far out there that you don't even know what the guy's talking about, you either cry BS or you keep your mouth shut because you don't want to seem stupid and you shake your head and say, wow, okay. So did that happen? Who knows? Now, Ed Leedskalnin showed every indication of being a natural geomancer also, which is a guy or a person who senses the unique telluric forces of the earth. He was highly intuitive, and he knew how to observe nature for signs of anomaly. Now, this ultimately led him to the discovery of vortex energy and the ability to harness the natural elements of magnetism, or so he claimed. He theorized that there was no such thing as an electron or an electron cloud. An electron cloud is caused by the disturbance of the steady state nucleus of an atom by bombarding it with neutrons or individual magnets, either one. That's in the used methods and techniques of atomic observation. Now, this formula of all energy and matter includes every single thing that exists, including you and I. On the cover of Ed Leedskalnin's book are two individual magnetic currents. Now, the simplicity of these two currents will blossom into the glorious complexity that becomes the blueprint of our universe, its base form of energy, and how its very elastic magnetic current tentacles stretch out to the vortex in motion. It is the construction and destruction process within the fabric of creation. What did that all mean? I have no idea. But that's what Ed said. Okay? Now, Edward was an interesting guy. You can't deny that. He was uneducated. But so was Thomas Edison, and he accomplished a lot. Now, here's the thing. How could he know these things? How? Now, maybe he just told a good story. Maybe he just spun a good yarn. Or maybe, just maybe, he appeared to be mystical enough so that people actually invented wild tales about how he built the Coral Castle using supernatural powers or extraterrestrial help. Now, what Edward did admit to using were the secret powers of the Egyptians. And I do believe him. However, I don't think it was necessarily anti-gravity or electrical pads or electrical waves of current power that allowed Edward to float the rocks. If then what was it? Once again, we'll get into that later. But Edward Leedskalnin was definitely an interesting guy. And a lot of people, I think, took what he said and then perhaps built their own stories onto the tale. And again, the structures were real. In fact, in Homestead, Florida, which, like I said before, is not far from Miami, you take the Dixie Highway south, and it's right there in the middle of town. This thing doesn't sit in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of town, the middle of a city. Okay. And again, it's not really a castle. It's not really made of coral. It's more limestone. Okay. However, it is an amazing achievement. Again, 1,100 tons of sedimentary rock. I think they call it oolite limestone or something like that. It was definitely quarried and sculptured in various shapes, walls, tables, chairs, even a crescent moon, even a water fountain, even a very accurate sundial. Now, here's the information sheet. I'm going to read it right off of the information sheet that I got from Coral Castle. It says, you are about to see an engineering marvel that has been compared with Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Egypt. That's what they claim. A little bit of an exaggeration, maybe, but it's still a very cool building. Okay, many sources claim that the castle is scientifically unexplainable. Now, according to the attraction's website, Coral Castle has baffled scientists, engineers, and scholars since its opening in 1923. It's appeared on countless times in books, magazines, TV shows. In fact, rock musician Billy Idol even wrote a hit song about the place called Sweet 16. The whole building, the whole park, the whole property is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Now, for decades, the park featured a perfectly balanced stone gate that, despite its weight, would easily swing open with a strong breeze or the push of a finger. Now, how it worked remained a mystery until 1986 when it stopped moving. When the gate was removed, it revealed that it rotated on a metal shaft resting on a truck bearing, like I mentioned before. Now, as strange and amazing as this site is, its history is equally improbable. Created by just one man, working all by himself for 28 years until his death in 1951. Now, although Leedskalnin was a private person, he opened the park in 1923 as a tourist attraction and would often greet visitors and personally show them his handiwork. Now, Leedskalnin was not only a hard worker, but also a self-styled philosopher. Some say kind of a crank or a raconteur. He issued a series of pamphlets about his personal views on social, political, and domestic issues. In fact, one moral booklet, it was entitled A Book in Every Home. It complained that the schools and churches are cheapening the girls. They are arranging picnics. They are coupling up with the girls with the fresh boys. And then they send out to the woods, parks, and beaches and other places these children so that they can practice in first-degree lovemaking. Wow. Okay. Leedskalnin also opined that the unemployment and powerless should not have voting rights. I'll quote again from the booklet. It's not sound to allow the weaklings to vote. Anyone who is weak to make his own living, or too weak to make his own living, is not strong enough to vote because their weak influence weakens the state. Now, he was clearly a man of strong will and convictions who prized self-sufficiency and a very strong, rigid work ethic. Now, there's lots of stories and wild theories emerging over the decades about how Leedskalnin created and built the castle. Some say he levitated blocks with psychic powers or by singing to the pieces of stone. Others suggest that Leedskalnin had an arcane knowledge of magnetism and so-called earth energies. Now, as tempting as it is to view the amazing park through a veil of mystery, I believe that Leedskalnin worked alone, using basic tools like picks, winches, ropes, pulleys. Remember, he worked on this thing for 20 years. Now, Leedskalnin himself said that he did it using hard work and the principles of leverage. The tools he used to quarry the rocks, they're on display at Coral Castle. and several old photos depict the large tripods, pulleys, and winches he used to move the blocks. Now, although the stone slabs that he quarried are huge and large, they're lighter than they appear because, remember, this is limestone. It's very porous. So while it was heavy, it wasn't as heavy as a solid piece of granite, for instance, okay? And also, although Leedskalnin worked alone, he was not a reclusive hermit. He had friends that saw him often. In fact, one man, his name was Orville Irwin. He was not only a longtime buddy of Leedskalnin's, but he was also a building contractor with a deep knowledge of construction techniques. In fact, in 1996, Irwin wrote a book with the very surprising title of Mr. Cant is Dead, the Story of the Coral Castle. And in it, Irwin explains through photographs, drawings, and schematics how it was done. Now, Irwin pours cold water on the paranormal theories that unknown energies, alien technology, levitation, magnets were used to build the castle. In fact, Irwin finds such theories an insult to the hard work and integrity of his good friend Ed Leedskalnin. Now, quoting Irwin, back in the days when Ed started carving out his original stones, Irwin writes, he was a generation who knew accomplishments by the sweat of the brow. It wasn't mysticism, but hard work. This is how Ed really accomplished the massive project. But how did he do it? Okay, hard work, perseverance, 20 years. There's evidence of the tools that he used. But he kept saying he used the secrets of the ancient Egyptians. And I believe he did. And they're on display at the Coral Castle. At least some of them are. What are they? Blocks and tackle, pulleys, winches, and levers. Okay. What do you mean by levers? Well, I mean, working on this Jaguar, okay, if I have a bolt that's too tight to get off and I can't get my impact wrench onto it, I'll take a cheater bar, okay, and I'll put that cheater bar, which is basically a 12-inch long piece of steel tubing. And you put that cheater bar on over the wrench or the socket wrench, and you got a lot more leverage. And now you can break that thing loose. In fact, quite often, this is so much leverage that I've sheared off half-inch bolts, okay? Through levers and pulleys and winches, you can harness a lot of power. And remember, he had 20 years to do this. So it's not like he had to do this thing overnight. A lot of people say, why? To build this thing nowadays, you'd have to use all this expensive machinery, which Leedskalnin did not have. However, today, using modern techniques and modern machinery, you could probably build this thing in about 2 months, not 20 years, okay? So while he used all these primitive tools, it took him 20 years to build this thing. That's a long time. Well, he was a mystic. How did he make a living? Well, easy. He was an entrepreneur. He charged a fee to have people come in and see the Coral Castle. So he just didn't build it, I don't think, out of heartbreak from his girlfriend who didn't marry him or his fiancée who didn't marry him. Consider the guy needed a way to earn a living, okay? And he was obsessed with making this castle so he could go ahead and make the castle at night, and during the day, have people come in and pay money to see the castle and make a living. So all these people said, well, Leedskalnin worked at nighttime because he didn't want anybody to see his secrets. No, he worked at nighttime because have you ever tried to work in the hot South Florida sun? It is hot, friends, H-O-T hot. Even in the wintertime, it gets to 80 degrees with sunshine, okay? It's hot in the wintertime. If you're going to do hard physical labor in South Florida, You're going to do it at nighttime. And besides, he made his living charging